Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Mark, and it's been a while since I posted a video on this channel, but I've been busy with my other channel, Mark's Awesome Adventures. In this channel I like to do a lot of vlogging and talking and behind the scenes kind of thing, let you know what's going on. That's what this channel is about. And it's been 2 months since the Ukraine crisis happened, and I haven't said a word about it because there's been so much heated discussion about it, and people are really polarized on both sides. But me, I have to be honest about who I am. A lot of you guys don't really know me as me. But the people who know me know that I've been involved with Russians for a long time. And I'm still deeply involved with Russians. I love Russians. I love Russian women. I love Russian music. The people who know me know that already. And the Russian music artists know that I love them. So there's a lot of Russians who live here on Saipan, and I've had interactions with the Russians who live here on Saipan. And so when it comes to this Ukrainian crisis, I am deeply in touch with what's going on. And I kind of wanted to enlighten the people in the United States to a lot of really what's going on, because the first thing I want to point out is that we already know how crazy CNN is. They're like off the wall. And they were off the wall during the Trump administration. And same with all, like MSNBC and ABC and all these other news organizations were completely off the wall with the Russian collusion thing. It was like they were almost trying to make Russia an enemy long before it even happened. Okay, so you gotta ask yourself why. I want to point out that if anybody goes back and digs deep into Ukraine and what was happening in Ukraine, you're gonna find connections to George Soros. And we already know what George Soros has been up to with the border, the southern border in the United States. So one can only imagine what he was doing in Ukraine. And he was doing it many years ago. Why? Why was he involved in Ukraine? That's a question I want to ask. Why was Soros in Ukraine? Okay, what was his intentions in Ukraine? Because inquiring minds want to know. Especially being that he's directly connected to all the BS going on the southern border. In my opinion, Soros has been nothing but anti-white. So why is he in Ukraine? If he's anti-white, and he's made it very clear he's anti-white, what is he doing in Ukraine? And I watch a lot of... I have a VPN. I watch a lot of news from all over the world. I watch news from India. I watch RT News, and I watch news from the United States. And I try to balance it out and try to figure out what is really happening. And what I basically see is I see both sides are like stretching the truth a little bit. But CNN, NBC, and ABC, those guys are off the wall now, as they have been in the past few years. They're just completely off the wall. I wouldn't trust anything that CNN or NBC or ABC or MSNBC, any of those guys, that they're all pushing the propaganda of the United States government. And what is the propaganda of the United States government? To try to portray the whole situation as if Putin just flipped his lid one day and decided to invade Ukraine. That's the story the West wants to push. How logical is that? That's what I'm asking you. How logical is it that somebody's just going to flip their lid one day and say, okay, screw it, I'm going to invade a country? How logical does that sound? Okay, I watched a documentary from RT, which showed thousands and thousands of Ukrainians in Donbass and Donetsk and the eastern regions, thousands of them, interviews with them, talking about how the Ukrainian military just one day up and decided to start killing them all because they spoke Russian. And they started calling them terrorists. And this was long before any of them armed themselves. This was back early 2014. And they were literally getting killed and tortured. This is interviews that I saw on RT-TV, which tends to lead me to believe that what I was watching was true, is because I was watching people tell their stories about where they lived in Ukraine as it happened. And what they explained was the Ukrainian military just decided that they were going to start killing a bunch of people who spoke Russian. And this is backed up by the fact that the Ukrainian government banned Russian television and Russian radio, which coincides with exactly what these people were saying. So I sincerely believe that part of the civil war and what was happening in Ukraine was due to the fact that there was a lot of anti-Russian sentiment in the Ukrainian government. And this is why they call them Nazis, because they were acting like Nazis. So this whole idea that Russia wants to denazify Ukraine, this is where it comes from, is because from what I can see, from all the evidence that I gathered, Ukrainian military drew first blood. It wasn't the Russians, it was the Ukrainian military that drew first blood. So, and from that perspective, the Russians gave them weapons, they gave them humanitarian aid, and I remember seeing the trucks going in early 2014 when they were given humanitarian aid, and I thought that because the Russian media was, the U.S. media was saying that Russians were were moving in weapons when they were moving in humanitarian aid. Now that I look back on it, after I've gathered the information, I look back on it, I can see that no, Russians were playing the good guys during that time. They were giving humanitarian aid, they were giving weapons to the people who were being attacked. So do I completely take the Russian side of everything? No, I can see what's happening on the videos, and I can see that they're overstepping their bounds a little bit. Trying to save the underdog is one thing, but when you go and start blowing up apartment buildings and hospitals and shit like that, that's when it I kind of start to say, wait a minute. But that's why I say both sides are lying a little bit. It's not just one side, it's not just the other side. I think both sides are lying a little bit. But I have friends in Russia that are half Ukrainian, half Russian. I have music artists that are full Ukrainian. I have a couple of friends that are full Ukrainian. So I'm on both sides of the fence here, and there's a lot of Russians who are not on board with this military, special military operation, as they call it. But one of the things I wanted to point out, one of the biggest things I wanted to point out is, do we have freedom of speech in the United States? We don't. You can't say whatever you want on Facebook. You can't say whatever you want on Twitter. And if I say the wrong thing here on YouTube, they're going to ban me here on YouTube too. We do not have freedom of speech in the United States. And I want you to ask yourself why. Why don't we have freedom of speech in the United States? It's guaranteed in the Constitution. Why don't we have it? I want you to think about that long and hard. Why don't we have freedom of speech in the United States now? We don't have it. People are being cancel cultured from their jobs for saying the wrong thing. We don't have freedom of speech in the United States now, and it's leaning more and more towards the same type of culture that's in Russia, where they can't say what they want. They can't go out and protest against the war. They can't They can't do whatever they want. They can't say whatever they want. And that's the way the United States is becoming. I want to ask you, is that fair? Is that the same? I mean, we're basically leaning towards the same type of system as Russia, and then we're treating Russia as the bad guys. But as far as the war in Ukraine, I am not fully in agreement with it. I think maybe it's out of control. Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing in the beginning, but from what I see, it looks like to me like it's getting out of control. I don't know who's supposed to be controlling the situation, but to me, being a person that was in the military, I think it's getting out of control. And it doesn't reflect well on the people who are in charge of the military, because they're doing things like, for example, I could get into 1,000 examples. I don't want to even go there. I just wanted to talk a little bit about it so that people know where I stand on the situation. And as far as in Saipan, we try to be more positive. We don't try to talk a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think that anybody who's in Ukraine and wants to escape all that stuff, I think they could come here. They probably could claim refugee status, because this is U.S. territory, so they probably could claim refugee status and come here to Saipan. There's a lot of Russians who live here, so if you're Ukrainian and you speak Russian, you'll fit right in. And if there's any Russians who live in Russia and want to escape all the sanctions and all the negative stuff that's going on in Russia, you could come to Saipan. I don't know whether or not you'd be able to get any refugee status for it, but that's a whole nother issue. But I don't know how the Russians who have lived here for so long have managed to live here. It's possible that CNMI has a different policy about immigration than the United States in particular. But this is a U.S. territory, so I mean, it's not an official U.S. territory. It's a Commonwealth, which is a little bit different than a U.S. territory. So maybe that's the issue. Maybe the Commonwealth has more of a jurisdiction over immigration than the United States does. But I do know there's a massive amount of Russians who live here. And if there's any Russians who are trying to escape all the BS in Russia, I think this is a great place to come, because you get peace here. And just like the people in the U.S., if you're in the U.S., I already know how crazy the U.S. is. That's why I left. So if you want to escape all the craziness in the U.S., Saipan has got a U.S. post office. Saipan has U.S. government offices here. So if you're getting a welfare check or something, you can collect that here. Saipan has the FBI. Saipan has Homeland Security. So it's not a state, but it operates almost like it's a state. The only thing that is the government of Saipan, the Commonwealth, the CNMI government has the ruling authority over the United States jurisdiction. That's how it plays out. Hey, sorry about that. I kind of got space invaded by some locals. Anyways, yeah, I just wanted to mention my position on this Ukrainian crisis. I really don't agree with what's happening. I feel sorry for the Ukrainians, but at the same time, I really don't think a lot of the Ukrainians know what's going on, because there was a civil war since 2014. They should know that. They should know what caused the civil war. Okay, the protests that happened in the beginning, which created the civil war. Americans have no idea what happened in Ukraine. That's the sad part about it, is that the U.S. media just portrays this whole issue as, oh, well, Putin just flipped and decided to invade Ukraine. It's not what happened at all. And this has been building up since 2014, and anybody who's interested needs to do their research. For me, I still study Russian. I still listen to Russian music. I still love a lot of Russian people. I have lots of Russian friends that I communicate with on the internet every single day. And I'm not going to stop loving Russians. Just because someone made a bad decision, it's not my fault, and I don't hold all the Russians accountable for what Putin did. I think that if I was going to talk straight to Putin, I would tell him he needs to start thinking about what he can do to show love and compassion instead of hatred and contempt. If he firmly believes there's Nazis all over in Ukraine, and these guys in the Ukrainian military are seriously trying to kill a bunch of Russians in Ukraine, if he seriously believes that, then I think negotiations is the best way to handle the situation. If he negotiates some kind of a treaty that says, you know, hey, if they do this kind of stuff, then the Russians are going to come back. But I think they have to strive towards equality and fair treatment for everyone. If they strive towards fair treatment for everyone and stop the war. War is not the solution. I don't believe war is ever the solution. War is a disaster. And special military operations are the last resort. Okay? It's not the solution. It would be better to drive the tanks right up to the Capitol and surround the Capitol instead of blaming the people for the actions of the government. And destroying the apartment buildings of the people for the actions of the government. That doesn't make any sense. But in the U.S., I think we need to strongly consider what's happening with our media and the censorship in the media, because we can point the finger at Russia, but we're not that far off from being exactly the way they are. So I think we need to take a very close look at what we're doing, because if you look back at the last election was a farce. There's overwhelming evidence that the Democrats stole the election. So if that's the case, we already have a problem in the United States. We have a huge problem in the United States. If our president is illegitimate, we have more problems at home than we have it in Ukraine. We literally have a civil war boiling underneath it all here in the United States. So we have no business worrying about what's happening in Ukraine if we can't even maintain our own government or our own election system. I think we seriously need to consider that before we start worrying about what's happening over in other countries. But yeah, I just wanted to make this little video to let people know my position on the situation, and hopefully give people some kind of an insight on what's really happening. What really happened was there was a civil war. I forgot what the name of the thing is that started the whole thing. It was a protest in Ukraine that started the whole thing, and then later on, for some odd reason, the nationalists in Ukraine decided that they were going to start killing anybody who spoke Russian, and that's insane because half the country in Ukraine speaks Russian. So for them to adopt that kind of nationalistic craziness is insane. But I listened to thousands of interviews through RT Media, and I believe what I was watching, because it was the people who were talking. It wasn't actors, it wasn't propaganda, it was actual interviews of the people who lived in Donetsk and Donbass. And they were explaining what the Ukrainian military was doing to them before they had weapons, before they had any help at all from the Russians. And so, like I said, Ukrainians military drew first blood, and you got to ask yourself why, and then go back, because that's the source of the whole BS. There's some indications that the whole thing was instigated by the CIA in the United States. The overthrow of the regime and all this other stuff all was instigated by the CIA in the United States. There's evidence to prove that. I can't prove it, but I have read a lot of documents that suggest that that's a possibility. If that's the case, and you have all the United States government who's all anti-white, what's to say that they didn't start all this BS just to kill a bunch of white people? It's not too far-fetched, especially if they're that anti-white. CIA gets involved just so they can provoke Putin and start all this BS to kill a bunch of white people. It's not unheard of. I mean, they're definitely not paying any attention to the southern border. They're loading a bunch of people on planes from Afghanistan, but I don't see them loading too many people on planes from Ukraine. So you got to ask what's up with that. Just think about this stuff. That's what I'm saying. Just think about it. But anybody who wants to get away from all the BS in the world, whether it be Ukraine, Russia, U.S., Saipan is an option. Well, if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.